Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here for our NALBA Facebook Live. My name is Dr. Susie Villalobos. I am the Program Director for the National Latino Behavioral Health Association, also known as NALBA for short. Thank you for joining us today to our Platica called Tenemos Voz, We Have a Voice. I will be the host today alongside my guest, whom will introduce themselves shortly. NALBA is a nonprofit agency dedicated to the well-being of Latino individuals, families, and communities in New Mexico and across the U.S. Our mission is to address the disparities and barriers affecting the behavioral health of Latinos. Today, we are excited to present our Plática series called Tenemos Voz. Plática is a Spanish word for conversation. Today, we highlight the work of our guest panelists and their experience in their journeys toward Latino identity and work with the LGBTQI+ intersectional Latinx communities and families. NALBA would like to thank Dr. Lisa Cacari-Stone, the UNM Tree Center, and the University of New Mexico in making this Plática possible. So I'd like to begin with introductions of our esteemed guests. And I'll start with Dr. Lisa. Dr. Lisa Cacari-Stone is currently a professor at the University of New Mexico and has dedicated 35 years of leadership in advancing health and racial equity for diverse communities in New Mexico, nationally and binationally. She has served her community as a child welfare worker, a mental health practitioner, director of senior services, state behavioral health manager, policy analyst for the New Mexico State Legislature, congressional fellow for Senator Ted Kennedy, and more recently was elected as commissioner with Santa Fe County District 2. Welcome, Dr. Lisa Cacari-Stone.
Thank you, Dr. Villalobos.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Roger Montoya is an American humanitarian recognized in 2019 as a CNN hero for the visionary programming at Moving Arts Española. Roger was born in Denver, Colorado in 1961. His parents, Jose Amado and Dorotea Montoya, are the most important reasons he has succeeded as a dancer, as a painter, an arts and education advocate in northern New Mexico. As a child, Roger developed parallel interest in painting, visual arts, and in movement, gymnastics, and dance. As a teenager, he earned a spot on the U.S. gymnastics team that traveled to Romania, France, and Denmark to train on an athletic cultural exchange program. Welcome, Mr. Montoya.
Thank you, Susie. It's an honor to be here. Muchas gracias.
Next, we'll go to Gabriel Garcia Roman, who was born in Zacatecas, Mexico, and raised in Chicago's Northwest Side. He received his BA from the City College of New York, where he studied studio art and currently resides in New York City. Mr. Roman is a multidisciplinary artist and craftsman who examines and decodes the politics of identity through intricate and process-based work. His art has been acquired by the International Center of Photography and has been shown at the Museum of Latin America Art in Long Beach, California, Galeria de la Raza, San Francisco, California, Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, New York, the Center for Photography at Woodstock in Woodstock, New York, and the BRIC in Brooklyn, New York, and numerous other institutions and galleries. He was also the 2018 recipient of the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture Artists Grant, and in 2019 was commissioned by the Leslie Loman Museum to bring his Queer Icon series into the streets for the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, where 100 queer icon flags were marched down the World Pride route. Welcome, Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Dr. Susie, for the invitation.
And next, we have Ms. Daisy Rosero. Daisy was born and raised in Corona, Queens, New York, New York's most ethnically diverse boroughs. Ms. Corona is also one of the neighborhoods hardest hit by COVID-19. Daisy is a first-generation American of Ecuadorian descent with indigenous and European roots. She came to New Mexico 21 years ago to complete her undergraduate degree and stayed on to work in community and ultimately returned to school to complete her master's. Daisy is a public health professional with a history of community advocacy and engagement and program implementation. She has worked with underserved populations and is dedicated to facilitating cross-discipline collaborative opportunities to tackle issues of health and social inequities. Over the past 15 years, Daisy has engaged in the implementation of programs aimed at addressing alcohol abuse in youth and adults, and has facilitated activities aimed at understanding disparities that contribute to the problem of substance use. Daisy has also led the implementation of the New Mexico School-Based Health Center Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment, also known as SBIRT program, and the statewide program aimed to improve the health and healthcare experiences of youth using motivational interviewing and other evidence-based practices. Welcome, Ms. Roman.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone.
Wonderful. So here's how today's Plática will work. We have several questions to get us started and to encourage you, our listening audience, to ask questions or make comments on our Facebook Live. And we will direct the questions or comments with our presenters. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to just throw this question out, and any one of you can answer this question, and we can do a round robin. So first, can you share about yourselves and how it aligns with the project and the work and journey towards your Latino, Latine, or Latinx identity?
I'll go ahead and get started, Dr. Villalobos. Just want to recognize the National Latino Behavioral Health Association as a landmark beacon of light in the United States right now, as we consider shining the issues on why mental health is so important and resiliency, particularly for diverse Latino, Latinx communities. And for you, Dr. Villalobos, also just today being Juneteenth, protecting rights, commemorating the ending of slavery, as we also celebrate Pride Month and honor resiliency with LGBTQI+ communities and diversity. I come from a mixed Chicana background. My dad is English, Irish, and French. My mom is Mexicana from Purepecha. The word Cacari is Purepecha from Michoacan. And I grew up in a queer family. We never thought about who we were growing up. And I always thought it was normal that you'd dance around in the living room listening to Judy Garland and Barbara Streisand and, and also doing cumbias. And there was just so much about growing up that embraced Queerencia, which is our project that brings us in this circle today together. I really honor Daisy and Roger and Gabriel as amazing colleagues. And we had this project, Queerencia, coming from the word querer, to love, to have this beloved embodiment of who you are, a love for your land, for your people, for your cultura, for your heritage. And we mixed it to honor being queer. And often there's backgrounds and communities where our young do not feel honored by their familias. I grew up in a family where it was a don't ask, don't tell back in the 70s and 80s. I had a beautiful cousin who died of AIDS, and we didn't talk about it. And he was a beautiful out gay brown man. And I think Querer really embraces this love of who we are and to celebrate who we are. And more than ever, I just saw this morning, Dr. Villalobos, that Trump is cutting now the 988 call funding for LGBTQI+ youth. And I just want to put a message out today that you have those who love you. And it might not be people in your family or those around you, maybe it is. And I hope you're blessed with that. But my colleagues and I today, just to stand together and say, keep your dignity, keep your love for yourself, your querer, for who you are and all that you are and all the beauty that you are. And I think that was something our parents instilled in us. None of us 4 kids who are all gay, my siblings, my sister, my 2 brothers, my parents never had a message of you're bad. I know my father had a difficult time at first with my brothers, but everybody came around. And I'd have to say that that love is important for dignity and for resiliency. I'll pause there because I think today's really about youth, and I want to honor the youth in our next generation.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you. Yes, I was gonna mention that they are shuttering that option 3 on the 988 hotline, and I think it's important that we still advocate and for any challenges and barriers that any of our youth are facing today. Daisy, Gabriel, or Roger, do you want to answer that question? Go
Yeah,
ahead, Gabriel.
I can go. Hearing Dr. Lisa talk about her experience reminded me of my youth also, and it was my sexual awakening happened during the AIDS crisis. So with my family also being very anti-gay, it really shut me in the closet, and also not having resources or any mentors growing up, I felt really isolated, felt really alone. And it wasn't until my adulthood that I started discovering or creating community within my own queer, my queer community or queer network that I have now. And when I started making art, I knew that that was what I wanted to do, was create work that highlighted queer folks of color, Latinos, because yet growing up, I never saw my community, I never saw myself represented in any form. So I've made it my life's work to highlight stories of people who are doing work for the community. So I think that's how we've all aligned or have come together in this project here.
Thank you, Gabriel. That's such a wonderful story, and your bravery and your courage to go through that time. So thank you for sharing that. Daisy or Roger, do you want to go next?
I'll go next. That's okay, Roger.
That's good.
So one of the underlying threads in the work that I do in academia examines disparities in vulnerable populations. And I explore factors that contribute to resiliency. And so what helps people thrive? And that work for me is rooted in my ancestry and my, dual nationality, in growing up in different spaces that for a young person can be very confusing in a way because you are not from one place and you're not from another. I'm from Ecuadorian descent, and we spent half our childhood living in Ecuador and also in New York. And so there's these two ways of looking at the world that I experienced. And in both of those spaces, we all go through challenges as young people. And in both of those spaces, I was constantly looking for what are those things that that help me build who I am, right? Because when you come from different places, your identity is broad, but you're not always sure what that looks like. And so for me, the work that I do was looking at what makes people strong? What makes me who I am? What is building my identity? And similarly to Gabriel, I was drawn to the arts, and my undergraduate degree is in art history and Latin American studies. And so I brought this perspective into my experience and the work that I've been doing with the queer community from an artistic and historical space, and using that to build on research that we do with our queer Latinos, and sort of it's a thread that sort of ties in all of these ways in which we become who we are. And so that's just, I guess, a long-winded way of saying that in order for me to think about what identity means and how it relates to this project, it is looking at our entire experience, what we call intersectionality, right? And that just really means all of these bits and pieces of who we are. We are female, we are, gendered, we are Latin American, we are, from rural areas or, urban areas, and using all of those things to build who we are and our strength. And so, yeah, That's my Latinidad.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. My name is Roger Montoya, and it's such an honor to listen to my colleagues and hear their stories and the threads of all of these unique but united values around resilience. My life's work for the last 35 years has centered in nonprofit work, arts education. My current nonprofit, the last 18 years, is called Moving Arts Española, Artes Movimientos. And it really centers on creating a space that is completely open to all peoples in an area in New Mexico that has some of the most tragic statistics around violence and suicidal ideation and DUI deaths and opioid deaths and all the rest. But what's so powerful is that the place also, and more foundationally, rests on our languages, our cultures, our familia, and the sense of true resilience to move through from a place of trauma to one of trust. We use something called art as medicine. And intentionally at Moving Arts, we created a nonprofit with about 18 strands of arts activities. I was a painter. I am a painter. I'm a choreographer, a dancer, an actor, amateur chef. I love architecture. So my partner and I designed a space where over 350 youth are able to enter the building each week and navigate and move through a myriad of opportunities in finding their own belonging, both in community and in personhood, if you will, and then learning over time to creatively contribute to the broader world through the arts directly, or just through the sense that we rely on one another. The interdependence is so important. As an out openly gay man, HIV positive now for 40 years, this is my 40th year as a survivor, I too navigated that incredible decade from 1980 to 1990, roughly. That was just a severe struggle to move through. But I think what was so resoundingly important for me as a takeaway was that we never gave up. We included other communities that were struggling and were misunderstood. And I think that's what we have to carry forward for our young people. Recently, we were part of an event in Albuquerque where most of us were present, and it was such a celebratory moment in that it's Gay Pride Month. I've attended plenty of parades and drag shows and yada yada, but it was the most beautiful moment to actually center youth, allow them to speak, to move, to be, to vision their future. For me, I just left, my heart was full. And I said, this is the work that has to be done. So I'm going to stop there. I could go on in gratitude, but what an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you all for sharing that and for being transparent and allowing others to see that we do have a voice, and when we share our stories, we make it okay for others to share their stories as well. And Roger, you touched on something that I think it's not in what we were gonna go to, but I think it's important that you talk about the event that did occur and what was going on at the event and how it all came together and who was there. So Lisa, do you want to start, and then we can go from there?
Sure. I think that my colleagues could talk to the creative part of this and the celebratory and the partnership. But you know, we do a lot of research at the University of New Mexico, but it's what, 2025. And Susie, NELBA has done the evidence-based Latino prevention compendium. And when we look at the evidence of what we know, how people heal, what protects them, what mitigates risk as a youth or as an adult, how you build the resiliency that Daisy was talking about, we still have very scant evidence-based programs for LGBTQI plus, but especially for Latinx, Latino, intersectional youth. and adults. So first, I want to just say that gap's still there to whatever audience might be listening. That's our call to action, to continue to forge knowledge on what works and to continue to invest in knowledge that advances social change and healing. So we had a project using National Institutes of Health funding prior to this current federal administration. The NIH 50 plus institutes are there to generate science that solves our human problems today, that advances health. And, we have amazing scientists and social scientists at the University of New Mexico. Daisy's been a colleague there with myself. We have a National Research Center of Excellence. And one of the call to actions that we've stood up to meet was that we really want to have and generate knowledge with communities. So this project was sort of born both from our Transdisciplinary Research Center. We had a project with a transgender center in Albuquerque with one of our nursing faculty. And during the year of Stonewall, I believe it was 2020 or 2019 was the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. And we started acknowledging the fact that, we need to build some knowledge and do some partnerships with Latinx LGBTQI+. So we started doing initial engagement at the Prides, the Pride Santa Fe, the Pride Albuquerque, and we collaborated with the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation. And then from there, we were able to build a project from additional funding with the Community Engagement Alliance out of NIH to do digital stories during COVID. So we have rural Dene, border Latino, Native American homeless folks, Asian Pacific Islander, Asian American, and some digital stories that we were able to generate were around from the Latinx community, and they're beautiful. They're online, and basically people worked to develop their own story. And I just want to highlight the power of story, that research in itself is the stories that we tell. Because through sharing our stories, we discover self again, but we also discover that we're not alone. And we wanted to generate those stories, particularly for youth in rural communities, northern New Mexico. And that's why we called it Queerencia. That's a little bit about that. And I'll leave it at that because it fast forwards to the centering art and creative expression. And I don't know who from my colleagues want to jump on here on the Queerencia project.
Yeah, I'll say a little something and then give the floor over to the other folks as well. Querencia itself, thank you, Lisa, for explaining the background of the project. But Querencia was built on social theories of belonging. So really all that refers to is how do we find and connect with community? And through the storytelling that Lisa was referring to, we were able to record stories, real stories from real people in our community and share those through our website. And with this additional pot of money that we received, as a creative, and Gabriel can understand this as well, in academia, we tend to disseminate information with reports and papers and white paper, and all that is really important work. But this project was about community and about expressing and showing community that there is community, so, to put it very simply. And so serendipitously, we connected with a gentleman named Maiwa, and he put us in touch with Gabriel because one of the things Lisa had asked me early on in this project, she said, "What do you want to see out of this?" And my response was, "I want an art show. I want to see a community event where we show this work to everyone." And we just pitched around some ideas. And when we met Maiwa, we were very like-minded in that respect, and he connected us with Gabriel. And so that's where we developed this project to have youth involved and to really celebrate and elevate our Latino queer people in New Mexico, because Latino voices are sometimes, overlooked, right? In our LGBTQ community in and of itself, there are lots of white spaces and white voices. And so our voices are not always the ones that people hear. And so this was an opportunity to not only celebrate our adults, those that are in community and already thriving, but also an opportunity for youth to express who they are, to see the models, the mentorship that is already out there in their own community. And so through that, and Gabriel, I'll let you explain the process of how we did the project. But that was that vision that we took from the academic space into this very pure, community activated, community centered, and community led in a way, right? We set the stage for the opportunity, but the youth drove the project in a lot of ways. So Gabriel, if you don't mind, or even Roger, if either one of you can add to that.
Yeah, sure. So I came into the project a little later, but I was asked to take portraits of folks in the community, in the northern New Mexico community. And so I've been working on this project called Queer Icons, that centers queer folks of color, specifically activists, community organizers, or leaders in the community. So when I was asked to be part of this project, it made sense, or it aligned with the work that I already do and the work that Maiwa and Daisy had shared with me. So it was already like a no-brainer that it would work well, that we would work well together. So when I was there, I knew that I was going to create or have a workshop with queer youth, but there was something very magical about moving arts in that space that, I don't know, I just walked away that day just feeling like just like I experienced something historical for me, at least for me, in the sense that I was in a space with queer youth who are Latinos, natives, and in a rural area where, in my mind, there's no resources for queer folks, no representation, and to be in a space with queer youth and talk about my project, and then they created their own portraits with people that they wanted to highlight, was just incredible. It was like beautiful to see so many youth also own their identity, but also be proud of their identity, share stories about how they got to the point where they're at. And also just the intergenerational aspect of this project, where it was taking portraits of the elders, right? As like Daisy had mentioned, they've already arrived or they're already there. And then to be in a space with the queer youth, to not necessarily to have something to aspire to, but at least like examples of queer folks thriving, to give them also just the idea that, I might be having a hard time right now, but I know that in the end, everything's going to be okay, because here are these doctors, these politicians, these artists that were in my position at a young age, and here they are thriving. So it was quite incredible. And then just 2 weeks ago, I don't even remember when it happened, last week, but just to see it all culminate in such a beautiful event like that was really amazing.
Wonderful, yeah. To my colleagues, thank you first and foremost for creating this whole trajectory that ended up being what Gabriel just described. It's interesting to note that in my 35 years of youth work in an arts creative setting, we had never done an event that was just targeting LGBTQIA+ youth. It never occurred to my partner and I, Salvador, that we needed to do that. And what our lives are about is just being like a quiet storm, just a really solid role model as a solid human. And that anybody on the outside looking in would just understand the gravity of that beingness as enough. But when we did do this event, it was remarkable because the outcome is lasting. It just happened 6 months ago. We invited about 15 youth, and I think 13 actually came. Many of them knew each other previously, but they had never really come out. You know, things are a little different today. Kids are more fluid. You know, it's not like, well, I'm queer, I'm this, whatever. But it gave them a sense of comfort and a sense of creativity. The prepared environment was decidedly masterful, being able to model after Gabriel's extraordinary work. And it was just probably the most significant 4 hours I may have ever done in this realm, because today, just 6 months later, those youth are more comfortable in their skin. They are speaking out, not necessarily about being gay, just about being human, understanding what they want to hold on to, what they want to dig into, what they want to discover in life. And for me, that's like a lasting outcome that is beyond measurable, because that's the work we need to do more of. I would venture to say that as adults and historians and academicians and everything else, that we talk too much about helping the upcoming generation. We need to do actual more processes like that, because it was so heartwarming. I completely remember that day, Gabriel, and we became wonderful friends through those 4 hours. And I just really respect you and thank you for being in my life.
Appreciate that. Likewise.
Yeah, and I got to say, belonging, because that's what we're talking about here. Belonging is a key factor in mental health, right? Belonging is fundamental to the human condition. We all want to be part of something. And so having strong community ties is protective for youth and for adults. And you can see even here, we're expressing that sense of belonging and community, right? So having those supports helps people cope with challenges, and it builds resilience. And that's what we were trying to do through this project, is build resilience. And Roger, I'm so happy and so glad that we were able to work with you and the youth that you work with on a regular basis. And you're right, you may not have thought that this was an important thing to do just specifically with the LGBTQ community. But it's an amazing, I think at the end of the day, it was just this amazing coming out for many of us, including, Moving Arts Española, right? As the first time that they did something like this.
Yeah, really beautiful.
Yeah, it was, I hear it was a wonderful event. I did see some of the photos that Lisa posted on Facebook. If anyone's interested, you can see some of the gatherings and some of the work that was done. And building on that conversation on the resiliency and some of the disparities that both youth and adults face, particularly in those rural communities, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the health and well-being of our next generations can benefit from this work. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but maybe expand just a little bit more. And I think I want to start with Roger. How do you think that this would really engage our youth in building on some of the conversations that may have been happening at that event?
I think now more than ever, with what's happening politically, the attacks, the pointed, intentional, just disgusting scenario that we're feeling, to contradict that, or to as a remedy, I think the best thing we can do is just fortify our community-based services and strengthen how we are able to be awake and watch and listen and notice where our community needs support, and continue to just dial it up, because it's going to be a spell before things shift and change. And I would venture to say that there may be some silver lining to all of this attack that we're feeling from the geopolitical structures that seem to be mounting daily, because it fortifies our own personal commitment to protecting and insisting on diversity, equity, inclusion with capital bold letters. It is our values. You know, we don't have to pretend to try to do that, but so I guess to answer your question, you know, let's just keep bringing the love and being the role models that we are, and encouraging young people to find that fire and to fuel it so that they do belong and that they can contribute and that they will become the leaders they were meant to be.
Thank you, Roger. Does anyone else want to answer that question? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Villalobos. I think we talk about health and well-being as like some sort of destination. To me, it's a commitment for life, right? It's part of our whole journey as we age, as we grow spiritually, physically, mentally. I want to talk a little bit as a policymaker why policy matters for the health and well-being of both youth and across the lifespan. Because a cool thing about this project, it wound up being sort of an intergenerational exchange. Many of us on this call never thought we'd be considered elders, Roger, Daisy, Gabriel, and Dr. Susie, but yeah, to these young people we are. And I don't think we've quite arrived. I'm still growing and learning every day. But I wanted to share, you know, New Mexico's a special place if we talk about Queerencia. And New Mexico has always been supportive policy-wise. Yeah, there's some hate. There's a lot of hate out there. There's discriminatory policies. There's structural violence. There's community violence. There's intra-relational violence, domestic violence with LGBTQI, right? But we've had more of an expanded and a solid ground for civil rights and human rights in New Mexico. And a couple of laws. I just sponsored a proclamation that Roger came and supported as a county commissioner, and not just declaring June as LGBTQI plus celebratory, but it's a month of resiliency, but that some of that resiliency and that sense of belonging is reinforced by policies that say, we're going to be this way and not that way. As governments, as communities, making sure there's we expand the Human Rights Act to include LGBTQI. We ban conversion therapy, which has done a number in churches and on young people. We the abolition of the gay and trans panic defense. This was an ominous bill eliminating the use of gay panic and trans panic in criminal cases. You know, right now, I think 120 some countries celebrate Pride Month, but we still have 64 countries that criminalize same-sex, same-gendered sex, and actually put people to death, right? So we're not that country, and we can't become that country. Legalizing same-sex marriage. My wife and I, Roberta Duran, were part of the Sandoval 64. Victoria Dunlap was the county judge back then, and it was scripted and organized. We stand on the shoulders of many, and we went to get married. You know, we weren't big fans of marriage itself, but of commitment. But when we went, we realized when I saw couples in their 80s crying on the grounds of the Sandoval County grounds there were rabbis there, priests there, and I realized how important it is to protect people's right to be married. It protects them in terms of their retirement benefits. It protects them in terms of home ownership. Also, just gender affirming care. You know, we have a governor who supports that. We have laws in place. So I just want to say that policies are really critical to making sure we protect people and have anti-discriminatory practices. And I want to put that out there that it's also programs, it's belonging, it's social relationships, it's young people feeling valued and by their friends and family, but it's also political. And we have to be sure we level the playing ground to have inclusionary policies that don't discriminate.
Good, Lisa. Daisy, did you want to comment on that question?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking along the same lines, but Lisa has explained it quite well, very eloquently, in that we do have to be active. We have to be an active voice. I hope that this work inspires connection and self-exploration, self-discovery, and action. Because we can do a lot of internalizing and community work, but if there's no movement forward in in policies, in connecting with our people in power to make the changes that are necessary to protect our communities, then there's not much left to say, right? It's the action that is needed, and I hope that this work helps to inspire all of those things.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think too, I'm looking at the time and I want to make sure that we get to all of the questions. You all are all stars in this arena and in this topic, but you were inspired by someone. And so I think there's probably key moments or mentors that help you to affirm and embrace your identities. Can you talk a little bit about maybe when that happened, if it happened later in life, if it happened early on, and how has that framed your work now? All of you are doing wonderful work in this this queer Queerencia project. So can we talk a little bit about your mentors and your mentorship and how we can pass that along? Because I feel that that is so important, as now we're known as elders apparently. So thank you, Lisa. And to bring up our youth in a way that builds up their resilience, and they know that they have a voice and we can advocate for them continuously, and they don't have to hide in the shadows.
I'll go first. It immediately comes to mind my mother, Dorotea Montoya. She, in our state in the Southwest, frankly, she's become quite well known. She founded the first ever school-based health center that had the real impact in Española. And she did that simply by listening and responding to the needs of young people across the health spectrum. She was one of the first public health nurses that was a nurse practitioner in the late 70s. And the model really looked at resiliency, and it looked at the positive aspects of youth development through the lens of healthcare. Back then it was just, the nurse's office, but she expanded the model so brilliantly. So I have taken that same model of community responsive lovemaking, if you will, by using creativity and all of the facets to make them utterly available, not just the young people, but their families. And within that context, I'm a gay man, I'm an artist, but it's kind of secondary. It's like, I get to be a practitioner of humanity first, not just a gay person or a HIV survivor. Those labels are rather thin. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Roger. Gabriel, I'll go to you, give you some time.
Sure. So thinking about that question made me think that I came out when I was 19, but even then I didn't have mentors. I still didn't have access to the queer community, even though I grew up in a big city like Chicago. But because Chicago is so segregated, it's so isolated. Where I grew up, there weren't any queer bars, queer organizations, clubs, anything like that, even in my high school. So I pretty much stumbled and fell, tripped until I was like 25, surviving, being a queer person, making mistakes, still, was going down the wrong path where alcohol was involved. And just because, again, I wasn't seeing any outlets, I wasn't seeing any future for myself as a queer brown man. And it wasn't until I moved to New York when I met my first boyfriend in New York City, was somebody that was a little older than me and took me under his wing and took me to my first art gallery, my first art museum, and showed me that my voice mattered, that my I was important, that whatever I had to say, my experience, my story was something worthy of sharing. And nobody had ever given that to me. And he was the first one. Yeah. Even now, whenever, anytime that I have an artist talk or talk about my work, I always bring up Bruce because he's the one who lent me his camera. And it was the first time that I started taking pictures and creating art, and who gave me my voice, or who I had the voice all along, but he encouraged me to use it. And I think I'll never, that's somebody that will always be part of my life because he gave me my wings,
Beautiful.
So.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Gabriel. Daisy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. This is kind of a tough one because growing up, I didn't have any queer mentors at all, really. I mean, there were people on TV, but there really wasn't that much out there. Even though growing up in New York, there's a lot of, activity, I didn't necessarily have what I would say were mentors, for positive queer images. But what I did have was family that I created and the family that I was born into. And throughout my life, I've had different people step in and be a mentor in one way or another. Mentorship isn't always one person that follows you through your life. Mentorship is that one teacher that comes in and tells you you can do it, or that family member. It's just very it's very broad for me, and that's what I had in my life.
Thank you, Daisy. Lisa?
Beautiful stories. Well, I think it's been a community of mentors in a lot of ways over time, like Daisy's saying. And even though I've had that, there's been moments of deep sorrow and isolation and depression as well. And I want to say that because it wasn't all just great, right? I grew up and I have two brothers who are gay, a sister who's lesbian, and they were mentors. I mean, being straight was the odd thing. It wasn't a choice, it's just who we were, right? And there were always family members, extended family. Oh, yeah, that Tio, yeah, we got stories about this person. And what I saw was also a lot of closeted queerness in a Mexicano immigrant family. And there was pain with that as well. And I think that mentors who did what they had to do to survive in those days, in the 50s, in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And I would say my brother closest in age to me has always been pretty fearless. And I remember one time I came out in Chicago, Gabriel, and I think there was coming out, but then there was coming out as a Latina in a Latina community with a gender diversity. And growing up in the Midwest, there's a lot of white European background, people with backgrounds. So the gay community in Chicago was not as diverse in the 80s as it could be, and it is more diverse today. So that's why a project like this is really important. And I remember one of the women that I met when I moved to New Mexico was Puerto Riqueña. She came from LA for curanderismo workshop. And I flew out to LA. It was LA Lesbian Latinas in the Arts Week. And it was this first awakening of the vibrancy of our cultura mixed with women, gender non-conforming, gender conforming, out Latinas. And, we had artists and people there, Terry de la Peña, and part of coming out in New Mexico also included being parts of circles of women in the recovery program, doing temazcals and doing sweat lodges and cleansing and being clean and sober. And many of them are Latinas, and there are lots of shoulders I stood on. But that awakening of coming out as a woman of color was the most powerful, because our Latina identities and sometimes are suppressed by the mainstream. So I think it speaks a lot to the the magic and the power of this project.
Thank you, wonderful. Yeah, and I'm looking at the time and I really want to give you all an opportunity to do some final messages around the Queerencia project, around the work that you all are doing, and really just, you know, give us an opportunity to, what can we do moving forward with some of the messaging that we've discussed here today about resilience, about mental health, about depression, about what are the workarounds now with this administration, with all the challenges and barriers, and really the shuttering of that option 3 for the 988 hotline for our LGBTQ audience. I mean, that's really something that we're gonna have to do a workaround for. And I think New Mexico in a lot of ways is ahead of the game. Lisa, with the policies that are in place, with the policies moving forward, you know, their vision for the future for the Medicaid and for the behavioral health system, the wraparound services. So what are some of those final messages that we can give our audience to really have hope, to really have a voice, and to advocate for this type of work? And anybody can go first.
I'll jump out. As a former elected official at the state representative level, my most potent takeaway was that the policies being made or the allocations being, made they rarely met the actual people who had the needs. And so in response to the question, like, how do we combat this negativity, these policies that are sort of stripping away all the safety provisions and protective factors, is to, all politics is local, really. Help those around you in the immediate circle do it as well as possible, because that strengthens in a measurable way, back to this political vision of, passing bills, and it just doesn't have enough impact, and people are suffering now. So my deliberate attempt to be more measurable was to return to the nonprofit world back at home, where I can see those children and their families in need and get to the service provision. That's my advice.
Thank you, Roger. I'll jump in. As an elected official now at the county level, and I appreciate what you've done, Roger. It's not easy to be a state legislature. I see the opportunity to really invest our tax dollars in programs that work for youth, people with lived experience. And one of the things that I see a dire need for is to look at the root causes of what we see in terms of mental health and substance use. It's a crisis of our times. And I think taking action and investing monies at the local level, not relying on federal dollars at this point, working with foundations that are inclusive and diversity, like LGBTQ, like Envision Fund with the Santa Fe Community Foundation, and really making sure that our programs are trauma informed. I called for our county to hire trauma-informed consultants and do training, because a lot of the roots of what I see, the homelessness, the fentanyl epidemic, as we're here in a NALBA forum, is we really have to look at healing from a trauma perspective. And what does intergenerational trauma really look like? And many of our communities, they're being put in a detention center, the adult detention facility, where people just need treatment. And the 90% of people in our detention center are on psychotropics. So they're going there to get treatment. Most of the people are homeless. They are out queer, transgender. So I think we need to have services. The Human Rights Alliance just got funded a small LGBTQ center, but we need to have safe spaces where youth can go to. We need to have spaces that people know, hey, you can come here, no questions asked, anytime, day and night. So we need more mentors. And we need to rely on nonprofits that actually support people, GLAD and PFLAG and other organizations. But we also need to diversify those organizations. So I'll stop there, but I think local impact does matter.
Well said.
Agreed, Lisa. Local impact does matter, absolutely. And that is where we should be hopefully putting in much of our efforts. I think what I'd like to see next overall is, and from putting on my community hat, my lesbian hat. I'd like to see people make the effort to connect in their communities, in their local communities, with each other, with their, with those organizations that are supportive. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all LGBTQ, because we have so many spaces in which acceptance and and passion is part of the norm. And then also practice self-acceptance, right? Because if we can, as individuals, understand and accept ourselves, it could be helpful to help us connect with others, right? I think young people now have an easier time coming out or identifying as part of who they are, right? With their with their gender or their whatever identity it is. And so I'd like to see more of that, more of an effort to connect in various spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I'd like to add, like, for me, it's about like hyper local organization, like participating in mutual aids, helping your neighbors, helping queer youth in your neighborhood, in within your family. Like, I've made it a point to mentor queer youth here in the city through workshops that I do or organizations that other friends invite me into. So I really think it's important to combat what's this current administration is trying to do, which is erase our existence, our queer identity, our immigrant identity, and we should be out there on the streets with our neighbors, making sure that our voices are being heard and that we're not going to run away and hide during these times.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And really, you all, this has been such a wonderful time. And thank you for allowing me to be in your space and to have this conversation about this wonderful Queerencia project. And I know that we are going to continue this work and that there is no stopping us. I mean, we advocate for our youth, and I think that's what impassions me the most is we have to leave behind something that they can work with. And with the work that Roger, that you're doing, and Gabriel and our policymakers, Lisa and Daisy with her research and, that resilience factor and looking at those root factors, what is it that really makes a difference? And I think if we have more of these conversations, then everyone out there knows that there's an opportunity to work together and to make that local impact, as everyone was mentioning. And in our audience, we had Tina Rodriguez, who really liked that conversation about local impact and how we can all make a difference. And I just want to real quick plug for NALBA is going to be having their conference coming up, and I hope you all join us. It's going to be August 7th through the 9th at the Clyde Hotel, and you can find out more information at our website, which is www.nalba.org. And again, thank you all. It was wonderful to have you here in our space, and I hope that there's an opportunity for people to view this even after we've done this. It's recorded, so lasting messages, and thank you all again for the work that you do.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Susie. Thank you, Nelpa.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Much love, everyone.
Love is love.